keep calm, carry on. There are two parts to that statement. The first bit is the keep calm bit. The second bit is the carry on. Carrying on is inevitable. Carry on, there's no choice in the matter. Whether you want to or you don't want to, as long as you're breathing, you have to carry on. The question then is, what about the keep calm bit? The keep calm part of that statement matters because it determines how well you carry on. It determines whether you do so productively. It determines whether or not you do so efficiently. The keep calm bit affects your relationships with people. It affects your creativity, and all of that matters. So within our body, we have a part of us that is carrying on. That carry on piece of it, which runs whether we want to or not, is always going on. That is what we call the autonomic nervous system. So today we're going to look at the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, which are the two parts of the autonomic nervous system. We're going to look at how it is it works and whether or not we have any influence on it. So influence is there at every stage. Because something runs in the background doesn't mean we have no control over it. It doesn't mean we have no influence over it. And so how you influence it matters. So we are not born with blank slates. We're not born with a sheet of paper that looks like this. In our day-to-day lives, we have something that goes on, and I'll show you this here as to what a day in the life of looks like. So this is a day in the life of anyone. You wake up, say at 6 in the morning from deep sleep, and something happens where you get up, you have your coffee, kids start screaming, you have to get ready for work when you used to go to work, when you get in the office, and suddenly you get up to a point, and then you have this sort of rhythm going through the entire day. From 6 in the morning to maybe 11 at night when you're just ready to fall into bed. This is a normal pattern. The pattern has 3 zones. There's a calm zone, which is the rest zone. There's a perform zone, which is the optimal place, which is a place in which we do our best work. In the place in which there's some stress, but it's manageable stress. It's the place where your brain is functioning the best. It's the place where you're able to connect new ideas, etc. The other zone is the panic zone. And I don't have to describe what that looks like. That's the red zone. That's the bit that it's all right to touch every now and then, but you don't want to be living there. Your sympathetic nervous system is responsible for taking you up. Your parasympathetic is responsible for calming you down. So typically with a sympathetic system, your heart rate goes up, your breathing goes up, your voice gets more high-pitched, your muscles tense up. This is the bit of us where it's the fight or flight syndrome, where it is, for example, life is in danger. So imagine you are standing in the road and a car comes towards you and it's racing towards you, and you immediately, not think, but your body reacts. Your heart rate goes up. You got to get out of there. You're breathing faster because you need more oxygen in your body. You need to tense up, to be able to move quickly. That's the role of the sympathetic. The parasympathetic is the opposite. The parasympathetic is what we call the rest and digest part of it. It's the bit where you slow down, or your heart rate slows down, your breathing slows down, your eyes soften, and you relax a bit more. So the two are cycles. When you're asleep, so anywhere from 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, you're at a fairly low sympathetic and a high parasympathetic. In normal life, the parasympathetic is the one that we should be in more of the time. We should be at this calm zone level for most of the time. If it is that you're up here, then I suggest we've got some problems. The fight and flight bit. The issue for us all in these times is that it is not where we can distinguish whether or not we're physically in danger or not. So your mind, your brain, your body can't distinguish between, is this a car running towards you? Is this the house burning down? Is this, as the prehistoric man had, tigers chasing you? Is it snakes after you? Is it a flood? All of these things create that whew. But we can't distinguish between that and the fact that I've got a nasty boss, or I've got a problem that's tensing me up, or I've got bills to pay, or I don't know how to get out of this situation I'm in with the relationship that I'm in. All of these situations look exactly the same to you and I in terms of our response, our sympathetic and our parasympathetic. The fight and flight makes no distinction between what's a real perceived threat and what is a psychological threat. The fight and flight makes no distinction between what's happened in your past and what's happened in your present. In other words, you could have had something that's happened to you growing up as a child. You could have had the nicest parent, the nastiest parents. You could have illness in the past. You can have relationships that have broken down. And all of that past experience can be relived in the present and affect your sympathetic and parasympathetic responses. So parasympathetic is calm, but the sympathetic, let's look at what that looks like. And a typical day with excess sympathetic looks like this. You wake up in the morning and you go, yeah, oh. And whatever happens triggers this S, this stimulus, shoots this person straight up to this stressed out bit, this panic bit. And it's sometimes obvious and it's sometimes not. Because all of this is running in the background. And it is very, very hard sometimes to see, is this person stressed out or not? Because if you're continually living at that level, if you're continually in this zone, outwardly, you may look exactly the same as somebody who's in this calm zone. Maybe not completely, but you get used to this and it starts to become fairly indistinguishable for a lot of people to figure out, am I in this zone? One way of testing whether you are is just look down and see, what's my hands doing? Is it clenched? Is it unclenched? When the phone rings, what happens? Are my hands clenching? Is my breathing going up? It's the same sort of thing that tends to happen when you hear a siren. Everything goes up in response. You know, if you see like, oh, there's a policeman coming towards me, you get this sort of stress response. But you outwardly could still be smiling. So if your day consists of about 75% or more in this zone, we are in excess sympathetic. So somebody could be in the office, at work, at home, and a trigger happens and they're still going up and down, up and down, up and down. And they get a really big stressor, whatever that stressor is. It could be the phone call about the bills. It could be something that's happened, a report that's coming through. It could be the boss asking you to do a more difficult job. Whatever it is, it causes this sort of response. The issue is not the response, but the fact that it's always in this zone. And very, very infrequently do they drop out of the panic stress zone into the performance zone or even lower. So your day goes along like this, and at some point the person goes whew, and drops all the way down. They move from an overwhelmed mental, physical and spiritual state into a state of exhaustion. And it's not that we don't get exhausted, because we do get exhausted. You only have so much petrol in your tank. The problem with this situation is if it happens over and over again, you drop to a level of below normal. If this is sort of like the normal state, repeated exhaustion cycles drops you to a point where you're almost unable to respond later on. This starts to affect your sleep. This starts to affect things that are more chronic in terms of health. So the sympathetic parasympathetic is vital to understand what is going on. Because unless we have a sense of this is going on in my life at all points, then the next thing you need to figure out is what do you do about it? How can you influence this thing that is continually running in the background? This is the carrying on part of the keep calm. So it is important to realize that this is going on, because unless you know that this is going on, there is no choice. Without understanding, without awareness, we have no choice in the matter. So there are short and there are long-term effects of the autonomic nervous system. The short-term effects are the day-to-day, but the longer-term effects do matter as well. The next thing to look at is figure that this thing I'm describing to you is a nervous system scenario. That's the nervous system. But the nervous system affects two important hormones. In terms of the sympathetic, we have cortisol being produced and we have adrenaline being produced. The adrenaline is the one that tenses you up. The cortisol also has effects. So for both of these, let's talk about cortisol. Cortisol in the short term will raise your blood pressure, it will raise your heart rate, it will make you to hold on to things like fat. It increases the risk of diabetes if it carries on for a long period of time. Cortisol makes it possible for us to move quickly as well. So all the slow things that we do in life, all the rest piece, all the relaxing, all the healing bit tends to go down. So that's why cortisol is given to people if you've got an injury, if you've got a disease where the inflammation is high. That's when they give you something like a cortisol injection or cortisone injection in a joint, in your knee, in your hip, wherever it is that there's inflammation, because cortisol drops the inflammation, giving your body a chance to catch up with that and to lower that level. The problem is that if we have chronic cortisol production, it starts to affect not just the joints, the immune system, etc., but it affects the key bit there, which is the microbiome. So in the last 15-20 years, science has discovered more and more that we have these bacteria living inside of us that are actually more than the stars. And it is these microbiome, these bacteria, which there's some good bacteria, there's some helpful bacteria, and there's some bad bacteria which produces disease within our system. So if you have a lot of cortisol floating around for a long time, and this is where it gets chronic, this is where we're not talking about 1 day, 2 days, 1 week, or even 1 month. So we're talking about months and years of a system inside of us that is causing us to be almost permanently tense, or at least a higher level of tension than which it is helpful. When this starts to happen, straight away the cortisol causes an imbalance of the good and the bad bacteria. So when the good bacteria start to drop and the bad bacteria start to go up, inside of us, in our guts, in our intestines, things start to happen. So in terms of the intestine, every part of the lining or the endothelium, or the wall that separates us from the outside, starts to become leaky. So imagine this is a cell and this is a cell in your intestine, and it's like this. The bit in between is what's called the junction, and the junction is typically a tight junction. The junction stops things from getting from this side to the inside. It only allows in certain things. When we have more and more of the bad bacteria, what happens is that these junctions start to get leaky. These junctions start to open up or break down. And so more and more of the bad bacteria and the bad stuff that we're keeping out gets through. This causes a lot of stuff from inflammation. It's the cause of a lot of, I think, where we expect that there'll be more and more increase in gluten sensitivity for one. So keeping this tight junction, or the junctions within our intestines tight, is the responsibility of the good bacteria. But like say, the stress response, the cortisol, the way in which these things affect the bacterial balance start to affect us the longer and longer we exist in this sort of a state where our autonomic system is not working properly. So that if you want to see more or hear more of what that is, check out our episode on the resilience series, where we talk about nutrition and the microbiome. Because the way to repair the microbiome and to affect our health is by affecting what we eat, how we eat, and also when we eat. There are several ways in which you can affect your sympathetic parasympathetic balance. In further episodes, we'll be talking more and more in depth about a whole series of them. But I just wanted to show you the simplest one to do. But before we do that, I have to say, if you're like me, then you think, well, I need to see some kind of response to what is happening. That's why, for example, people can't stick to diets for very long, because it takes ages and ages to see a real response in terms of what's on the scale. And we're not psychologically wired for something that say, right, we're going to do this today, and in 6 months' time, we're going to see something different. It is hard to see into the future. We don't seem to have that ability to hold on for future gain, for present pain. So in terms of what I'm talking about, this is a useful tool. This here is what's called a pulse oximeter. It measures the oxygen in your blood, but it also, for what we're talking about, measures your heart rate. 10 pounds, 11 pounds, it gives you your heart rate before and after. So like a lot of these things we see in magazines, etc., we want to see a before and we want to see an after. So what I'm going to do is describe to you the first and easiest piece, and then suggest that this could be one way in which you can actually measure and say, okay, I can see the difference, let's keep going. The one that is simplest to do is breathing. So imagine again, the car is coming towards you, the train is coming towards you, the tiger is coming towards you, the boss is just getting angry at you. All of these things cause us to breathe faster, because it's that same old fight and flight response. We are getting ready to do something. So you start to breathe. And as you're breathing, what you're doing is you're filling up with oxygen. The oxygen is going, tensing up your muscles, and you're ready to do something. At the same time, you are blowing out carbon dioxide. And it's that piece of blowing out the carbon dioxide that is one part of the issue. Because as people, our normal trigger for breathing is carbon dioxide. If you have low carbon dioxide, something in your brain says, I need to breathe faster. So the first thing to say is, you're breathing faster anyway. You're blowing out more carbon dioxide. So you get where this is going, isn't it? But the thing that you're blowing out is the thing that's telling you to breathe faster. So you start to set up a cycle in which it gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. That's why sometimes people say, well, you know, how you deal with this panic when you get into a real panic is you give somebody a paper bag to breathe into. Because as you're breathing into it, you're breathing back the carbon dioxide, and the carbon dioxide is what's slowing your breathing. Really key for when you get to that point where it's really, really panic level. The other thing to realize is that as you're breathing faster and faster, and like I say, the body can't distinguish between something that's real and something that's psychological in terms of danger. So if there's no danger involved, and this is why it's important to say, well, if somebody is threatening you and you're in physical danger, then you're talking about a different conversation. But if the danger we're facing is psychological, it's fear-based, It's something that can be dealt with, but you need to be able to get the space to deal with it. Then we're on to what we're talking about. In that space, the breathing becomes important, because the faster you breathe, and all of these things are gearing you up to move, but there's actually nowhere to move. There is no need to move. Then you're left with a lot of tension in your body, and you need to be able to release it. The breath work is the first and the simplest way. So people say, right, well, slow your breathing down. Slow your breathing. And sometimes that can be easy to do, and sometimes it's a bit more to it than that. Because awareness is key. So what I say to people is put your hand on your chest, put your hand on your belly or your abdomen, and just feel it first. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. What is your body actually doing? Is it doing this? Or is it doing that? The first step is awareness, because awareness gives you options. So be aware of what it's doing. The next step is to figure out which bit of your body is doing the breathing. So in a panic state, it's all the muscles in the chest, in the neck. It's what's called the accessory muscles. It's this part that does the breathing first, because this bit is fast. The muscles here are quick response muscles. Abdominal or diaphragmatic breathing uses a bigger muscle, but it's a slower muscle. So if you put your hand on your chest again, and just breathe in and out. In through the nose, out through the mouth. And just feel what's going on in your chest and feel what's going on in your abdomen. Which one is moving first? Have a go. The first time you do this, you may not be able to distinguish what's happening. Is it the chest going up first, or is it the belly going up first? The chest or belly? And you can't tell the difference, or some people can't. So it takes a little bit of practice to just first be aware of it. The second part of that, or the next bit of it, is to actually control it. So breathe in and consciously use your chest muscle to breathe in. Then flip it around. So using the hand on your belly or your abdomen, press in gently while breathing. And what you start to feel is the difference between breathing from the abdomen and breathing. So just feel the abdomen being the leader and not the follower. And this is the goal of it, this breathing exercise, is to one, become aware, and two, to understand that you have a level of control. So like we said, the autonomic nervous system keeps going whatever, but you can and you do have influence if you wish to take so. So the goal of learning to figure out what is going on in your body is not so that that you will be the next genius or the best of anything, but the fact that what happens is that you're trying to reset the thermostat. So the thermostat would be set to a point which is way too high if the sympathetic's in control. So people who have way too high sympathetic thermostats, it's like it's got a very, very fine trigger that it shoots straight up, it stays up, and then it comes down with a crash. So basically what we've described before. And so what I suggest is a useful exercise is to just check yourself a few times a day, very, very briefly. Where am I breathing from? Am I in control? Is my sympathetic in control or my parasympathetic? And as you do that, you'll be more and more aware of what's going on. But so now you can carry on effectively. You will carry on with a sense of being in control, and you will also keep calm. So if you like this, please do subscribe to our channel. And the next episode we're looking at specifically how this relates to the work setting and in places where you may not have full control of the external. So we'll be discussing what that looks like, how that is facilitated by the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and what that means in practice.